Hello, John Felt here, and this is the Blue Water Outlook weekly weather briefing for July 28th, 2019. Now, you know, it's been really busy across the nation for quite some time as far as the middle part of the nation as we went from spring into summer. Well, finally, it's quieted down. We have some localized type weather patterns. But I think the story that I'm going to be talking about here, the really interesting story, is how amplified the jet stream will be and what that's going to do to our temperatures across the western U.S. and the eastern U.S. Let's get started. Three, two, one. So taking a look at precipitation across the nation last week, what we can see here is we had a very quiet pattern, very little precipitation at all over the western U.S., you know, the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, and areas over Washington and Oregon State. Very quiet, low stream flow, and very little precipitation. Now, over the middle part of the nation, we had some localized rainfall. You can see that the Missouri River Basin did receive an inch or two of rain. Over the eastern U.S., we had some rain that produced some flooding and flash flooding in some of the urban areas of Washington, D.C., New York City last week, early in the week. We also had some precipitation over the higher elevations, the Appalachians, but a very scattered type precipitation pattern. Now, we also had some tropical moisture here, and we were watching the tropics, but nothing really out there right now. So dew points are a measurement of the atmospheric moisture at low levels, and I sort of keep an eye on that just because that gives my initial clue as to where we might get some enhancement of heavy rainfall. The dew points maybe 72 degrees or higher right along the coast. Everywhere else, some drier air, and the drier air allows it to warm up, so we're having big daily swings with pleasant morning readings and warming up to hot summertime readings in many areas. But look at the western U.S. Look how dry it is in the western U.S. And again, that's that heat dome that's building in that area over the western U.S. And that's not likely to change a whole lot. Temperatures over the last week, we're going to see some big changes in this as we go over the next couple weeks, where we're going to see some very highly amplified type anomalies. I'll be talking about that in a lot more detail. Okay, so soil moisture. Well, the theme of the last couple briefings has been how we're trending back to normal over areas that have been very, very wet. We still have some vulnerabilities. This was Barry as it came up, so we still have some wet soils along the Mississippi River Delta. Scattered areas over the upper Midwest with some recent and some past rainfall, but many areas are drying out. I put out an ag update, I believe, just recently, and showed you how we're actually getting a couple pockets in here that are trending a bit on the dry side. From an ag perspective, we really want to see an inch of rain each week with some actively growing crops, and we're not going to get that. Now, fortunately, subsoil moisture is still in really good shapes, and even surface moisture in many areas. Hopefully that'll sustain the crops even if we do get in a dry period. The other thing we want to look at soil moisture is vulnerability. Should we get any tropical systems move in? And right now we're in decent shape. A little bit wet here if something comes in the central Gulf, but I don't see anything this week, and by next week it should be improving. Again, over the western U.S., very dry soils over the Pacific Northwest, including the Seattle area, western part of Washington State, and Oregon. Now, rivers above flood stage have really improved because of the heavy rain in the recent past. We still have some flooding going on the lower Missouri. Everywhere else has come down significantly. The upper Midwest, I see some above normal stream flows, those blue dots, and where Barry came in the lower Mississippi, some as well. So we still have some flooding, but overall quite a bit less than we've seen for quite some time. Tropics. Earlier this week we were watching the central to west Gulf for some possible development, but we had some wind shear, pulled everything apart, and you can see very little cloud action or cloud cover in the Gulf, not much in the Caribbean, towards Bahamas, so looks pretty quiet right now. It's still too early to get much over the way out in the Atlantic still. So I'll probably put out an update on the tropics again maybe next week and sort of show you we start to get a more significant ramp up, I believe, starting in August. So we will definitely in August. So we will put out something again at that time, but nothing this week. Okay, so let's get to the jet stream here, and this is where it gets interesting. Right now we have this area of high pressure over the western U.S. that dominates. We also have some jet stream energy pushing across the upper tier of the Midwest. That's not all that unusual. This is really going to build, and we're going to have a trough digging down in the east. So let's take a look at that as we go through our animation. This is the next 14 days. Well, we have this ridge of high pressure pretty much anchored in the same area. You can see it starts to push north, and then we get a digging trough in the east. And when we see that blue, that's indicating that that trough is unusually too far to the south. So by the end of the 14-day period in week 2, we have a very strong couplet here of a ridge and a trough. And what that's going to do to our temperatures here is really give us some contrasting temperature patterns with very warm temperatures over the west, especially the far western maybe quarter of the nation. And then some pleasantly cool, I shouldn't say cool, but pleasant summer temperatures over a large part of the Midwest and parts of the eastern U.S. So it's going to result in these very strong temperature contrasts. And, you know, considering this is the first part of August where we have that blue, that's going to be very welcome. It's going to be really nice weather, cool mornings, relatively pleasantly warm summer days. On the other hand, over the western U.S., we're talking about unusual heat and dry conditions. As far as precipitation goes, well, unfortunately, no precipitation of significance over the western U.S. We have some jet energy that's produced some heavy rain over the upper Midwest. We're going to enhance the precipitation over the Appalachians, and that's typical for summer anytime you get some moisture in the Appalachians. Otherwise, pretty quiet. So again, we're going to continue. This is, I think, maybe the third week of generally a quiet pattern. Now, August, September, we're starting to get into a climatologically quiet time of the year, with the exception of maybe some of these big systems that develop over the upper Midwest. And that's probably something I should talk about as well, these mesoscale convective systems, to bring that up. But I don't see any signs of those this week either. So here's your extended 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14. And look at this here, week 2. Unusually warm over the western U.S., pleasantly cool or pleasant summer weather over a large part of the middle part in the eastern U.S., and nothing of significance as far as precipitation overall. As far as severe weather risks, maybe a couple severe storms today, but nothing all that significant, and maybe some heavy downpours in Minnesota, but overall a fairly benign type weather pattern. So I think the big story is going to be a shifting to a highly amplified jet stream pattern that's going to result in contrasting temperatures, unusually warm in the west, nice weather in the east, and right now, tropics look quiet. That's this week's weather briefing. Hope it helps you in your planning. I hope you're enjoying your summer. I'll be talking with you again next weekend. Take care.